Hey, I was actually just about to head to bed, but I figured, alright, well, this could be a smaller tutorial, so why not? So custom actions, if we kind of break those down, would be the easiest way to do this. If I make a normal script, oh, don't want to have spaces in it. So it loads, and a normal script, and this is quite often scary for a lot of people. These things here are methods, right? And there's all types of different things like this that you can have. Right, there's all sorts of different things, and you can make your own custom ones and all kinds of stuff. And this is in scripting, right? So things like on collision enter. If you were to use this thing, this void, this method, when this object hits another object, Unity calls this automatically, and you have all of the information here, right? So this is kind of the structure of a basic script. Now, if we look into PlayMaker, we go up here, we go Tools, we go Custom Action Wizard. We can make a script. That's like an action. So, for example, let's do bool and float check, and you can select a category. You don't have to. You can also make your own category, right? Like this could be a tutorial. You can literally make anything, or you can just select one. So now you save, and you get a script. This is what the actions are. So when you open it up, they're a little different because they use PlayMaker stuff, I guess you could say. So you have on enter, and this happens when that action more or less enters, and it only fires once. But you could also do an override update, which fires all the time, like every frame. Often, if you ever look at custom actions, you'll also see someone might make stuff like this, some custom void, and then they'll use these to call into this, right? So this little space up here, kind of below this stuff, well, technically you can put them down here, but normally you put everything up here. My dog's eating something. So normally you would declare variables. Again, you don't have to, but let's say public FSM bool, call it anything you want, my bool, and public FSM float, my float. Now there's a difference here, right? So these are FSM variables, so they can be used throughout the FSMs like any other variable in an FSM, where a normal variable would be something like that. Right, so you normally don't use normal variables. You normally use the FSM versions of them. So the other thing you can do is public FSM event. So you can have an event. We'll say is good, or public FSM event is bad. Often you'll see a public bool, a normal bool, not an FSM bool, for every frame. And if you wanted to make it an FSM bool, you could. There's nothing saying you can't. But quite often you'll see it as a normal bool. So we could say, all right, let's say we want, let's use another bool. So we could say down in here under our do stuff, if, and we just write a little line like that, my bool dot value, and it's very important to have this dot value, because my bool is technically talking about an FSM variable, but it's not talking about what the value is. Where a normal float, you can say if higher, and it's talking about the value. So with the FSMs, you got to add this little value. So my bool dot values. So the other thing is you would think like is equal to something, right? In coding, you need 2. So you can say exclamation, and that means not equal, and that means equal. So if it's equal to dot value, so what we're saying is if this bool is the same value as this bool, then we can run logic in here. But what if we want both things? So you can say, oh, sorry, where is that frickin'? I know it's one of these. The hell is it? There it is. These 2 big lines is the OR command. We don't want that. We want the and again you need 2 of them. So and, so we're stating this. This has to be equal to this, and my float dot value. Now you could say is equal, or we could say is greater, or is equal greater. Sorry, like that, or less. So we'll say equal or greater. Usually on floats, you try not to say like exactly this is equal to that, because floats can be, they can have 0.0000 kind of thing. It's hard. So maybe that float's going to be equal to if higher. But with if higher, I'm not going to use the dot value because it's just a regular float. So now we're stating if my bool dot value is equal to dot value, and my float dot value is greater or equal to if higher, then we can do this logic. And maybe this logic is going to be, well, you could do any kind of thing, but let's just do fsm.event. We want to send an event. Which event do we want to use? Is good. And then we can say else fsm.event is bad. Right? So now I can turn around and say, okay, when we enter this state, we want to do this. We want to do stuff. And you do that little symbol there, that little thing. So now it's going to run this logic and then finish. This finish is a way to tell the FSM to more or less that this FSM is just, it's done, it's finished. So if you don't have this, the FSM won't transition to another state. Like if you use the finished events on it, because one of the actions, say like this action isn't finished, even though it may not be running anymore logic wise, it's not finished. So you would think, okay, well, we have update and we have enter and we have this every frame. So normally I could say if every frame we'll just encapsulate that. So we don't want that, so I'm going to put the exclamation in front of it. So if this is false, so if we're not doing this every frame, finish. Meanwhile, down here, I can say if every frame, only this time we're not going to have the exclamation, so if it's true, do stuff. So now this will do this every frame. Now we have two events here as a you know, if else. So we also could do else if not every frame. So if we're every frame, we're not even going to run the bad. We're just going to run this part. You can do it that way. You don't have to do that way. I'm just putting that in there as a demonstration. So if we close that now, hit save, let it compile. Let's create an FSM and we'll edit it. And oh man, I already forgot what it was called. Bool and float check. Oh, there it is under tutorial category. Right, so here's like this is the FSM variable. This is what it allows you. Where the if higher, it doesn't have that because it's not an FSM variable. It's a normal variable. Right, but the every frame, most of the time you'll see them like this. They don't have the FSM. So let's make two events. Is good and is bad. And let's just add those here. Is good, is bad. So let's say, oh, how should we do this? Let's say we're going to go with 10 and it has to be equal to true. And if it's good, we're going to use the good event. If it's bad, we'll use the bad event. Now, if we don't have every frame, if I hit play, see how it runs? It did the is bad, and this thing turned gray. Okay, so now if we turn on every frame, see how it's not running down that bad line? Because we had that little piece of code in there saying that it can only use this one if it's not every frame. So now it's sitting here and it's staying green. So if I turn around and I flick that, nothing happens yet, right? Because it wants both things. It has that and if I take this, slowly go up with it, is now good, and it fired off that event. So now we're checking for both things, right? And if we restart it, if I flick that down and put him above 10, he still didn't go off because now the bools don't match. But if I make this one off so they match, there it goes. So now we have our little custom action happening here with a few different things happening. So what else can we do with this? And that's just an easy way to get back into it. Right click and you can edit script on it. One of the other things is you can do public FSM GameObject, or no, public FSM owner default game. We'll just call it Geo, whatever. So this one's a little different than a normal FSM game object, right? So you have, this is just a variable of a game object type, but this owner default is how you get, if you look on actions, how you get this thing. You can specify a game object and use a variable, or you can say use owner. That and that's how you get that, is that little line of code. FSM owner default. Right, and then this guy here, he doesn't have that. He just has the variable option. He doesn't have the use owner because he's just an FSM game object. So what else can we do in here? So you'll see, like, there's some overrides that are a little different. So an override is what it more or less means you have like a method in the father of these scripts that are running these actions, and we're going to override the logic on it, I guess you could say. So we could do like on draw gizmos if selected. We could also do these ones. Those should work. I don't see why not. Draw it's a little different in here. I'm not used to that, so I'm not going to bother getting into that because I might mess that one up. What else do we have though that we can actually play with on exit? You know, I don't know if exit actually works. I've never actually tried it, but you know what? Let's try it. Let's see if this works. So this should be when we leave this state, something happens. So let's say my float dot value equals 0. Let's see if that works. So we have my float, and it's, you know, there, 0 anyways. And if we match up the bool and we take this up, technically, if that exit works, it should put this back to 0 when it leaves, right? Boo. Right, so let's take a look. Look at that, it worked. I didn't know that. Now we've both learned something new. Look at that, it went to 0. Well, isn't that cool? Ba-doop. So there are custom actions anyways. And you can do a lot with them. Like these are obviously small, right? And if we look into some of the bigger ones, Actually, you know what would be kind of a good one to look at? Is you have, right, these ones obviously, like, they have a lot to them, right? It looks like, oh my god, they're crazy. So let's just break these down. So this one's saying, this is using a special PlayMaker tag, which is what these little, when you use a square, things are. So this is saying that, hey, this object needs an audio source, right? And now we have our variables, right? Required field, and it's looking for type of audio source on this object. This is the slider, so the volume is using a slider. So if you, well, like if you put these two little lines, it'll kind of make it so this code doesn't run. See how it's turned green? So now this is just a float, a normal float, like you can make it whatever you want. This little line here has float slider, and then the little brackets it creates a slider in the FSM for this value. And you can make it anything you want. You can, it's 0 to 0.5 now, right? You can make it, you know, anything. Object type of audio clip, because we want to play a sound. So we're forcing this variable, which is just an object type, so it can actually be like anything, but we're forcing it to be an audio clip. So then we have a reset. So this just nulls everything out as a reset. Now we have our the auto name. Don't worry about that stuff. That's getting into some advanced stuff. So we have our update. So if audio which we don't know what that is, unless I guess we go over here. Where is audio? Okay, I guess it must be a static. It's not in the action. So if the audio is null, then return, don't run. That's kind of what this return does. It kind of ends, so nothing below it will run. So we're going to make a random, or not random, a kind of an undefined variable of an audio clip, and they define it as an audio clip from this variable. Audio play, so they're playing the audio. They're checking the volume in this one. If wait for clip dot value is equal to false, then we're going to send the finished event and finish. Then they do a return, but they also have if volume is none, right? There's a few different options here. On update, if audio is playing, but we have this guy, so this is now if it's not playing, then FSM event finish, and then, well, same type of thing. So I mean, it looks pretty complex. It looks pretty big. It's not too bad though. We won't save that one. We don't want to be messing around with some of that stuff. But there's a lot of different things. When you start getting into the raycasts and the overlaps, things get a little harder, a little deeper. When you start looking at raycasts, like, there's a lot of variables. These tooltips is just like, you can add those in, use those same little blocks. You tag it with tooltip, and then you can write anything you want. And those are what shows up. I can show you after. So we have a reset on enter. See how it says do raycast? That's all it does. And same with the update. And then we have the actual, void raycast. And as you see, like the raycast action, like this is going to be one of the bigger ones. You know, there's a lot more stuff to the Raycast. Probably not something you want to get into unless you're familiar with coding. Now it's got the debug option there. See, and if we add the Raycast, this is where if we mouse over, see how it says start ray at GameObject position, or use from position parameter. Get world position of ray point and store it in variable. But that's what those tooltips are. See, as we go in, that's what all this stuff is. This red writing. It's just to help you guys out information wise. Give you some information about these variables. So when you see an action, it's got all this stuff to it. I mean, it looks like there's a crap load of stuff here. Like, it looks busy, but I mean, if you were to take all of these out, as long as I don't save this is okay. And this doesn't affect the code at all. But I mean, these are just tooltips. But I mean, as you take them out, I mean, this action starts looking a lot less noisy all of a sudden, right? And if you start taking out the white space, this guy here can, well actually we'll look at that in the action section result, so keep that in mind. You'll see what that little tag does. But as you see, like, I mean, if you start clearing out the white space and the tooltips, all of a sudden, like, it's shrinking it down pretty far. So lots of times when you look at code, it can look pretty crazy, and there's a lot of space there that's just kind of there, more or less for the coders in the ways to understand things better. But for new people, it makes it look hard, right? I mean, even this stuff, I mean, technically, you can get rid of this stuff too. In reality, it shouldn't affect anything. It just helps. Oh, we'll keep that one, right? And again, if you were to get rid of the white space, I mean, you're compressing it down pretty far, right? So let's not save that, because I'd rather have the tooltips and stuff. So that one little thing that said action section result, if we look, see that? There's the result. It's not a variable. Doesn't do anything. It's just where we're going to store our variables. It's like just a section, right? Like, it's, hey, look, we're going to do our result in this area, right? There's another one for filter. So it's just a way to help organize, right? Like, if we did that up here, right? Like, if we say action section events, then we have our two events here. You'll see how this kind of organizes things a little better, a little cleaner for you. See how it says events? So there's our two events. It's just kind of like a little title for this area. One of the other ones that I've seen people fight with in the past, and I'll cover that one, is, say you're doing, I don't know, a dialogue system maybe or something. You could have a public FSM string, right? And I'm going to do this one twice, and I'll show you why. let's do a public FSM string, some other string. Now they're both strings, but I can tag this one and do text area. I don't think I have to add anything to it, but just tag it with this little text area. So they're both FSM strings, so they function exactly the same, but they will look different, or they should. So there's a string, and the text area, oh, maybe I do have to define the text area. Or maybe it's called something else. I forget what that tag is, but we'll take a quick little look. Text area, does it need anything? It can have an overload, so it can take something. What is it supposed to be taking? Usually it tells you. It doesn't like strings. It doesn't like integers. Let's see if there's another one. Maybe it was called something else. No, it is. Well, now I'm drawing a blank on that. But anyways, the text area, you can probably almost just Google it. There's a tag. Yeah, let's do that. Unity text field tag. Let's see what they say. That's more of all of this stuff actually works in those PlayMaker FSMs too, by the way, or most of this stuff. I don't see it there. I probably called it something else. So anyways, there is a tag though that you can use, and what it does, now that I've already talked about it, I might as well show you kind of what it does. Is here we have strings, and you have this one line, and the text area, so I'll have to look into that tag. Normally you would get actually a box that's a bigger box, so you can see numerous lines. It's just something else. It makes it easier to work with in some cases. But that's kind of custom actions in a bit of a nutshell. Again, you can link these things right to scripts as well. Like we have our sum script. And if I made this, let's just give this a variable, public float thing equals, I don't know, 99. So if I take this and just drop it on something, we have just a float variable of 99. There's nothing here. There's no logic, right? So if I now, let's bring this guy back. So if I use this owner, and we know this thing's called some script. What I can do now is say, hey, when we enter, let's say if higher is equal, but we're only going to use the one equal sign because we're telling it what it is. We're not comparing it. We're stating that it's going to be whatever we tell it to be. Is FSM owner default GameObject dot why does that look funny? Pretty sure that's how it's written, isn't it? Oh, FSM get owner default target. Oh my god, where are we? So FSM dot get owner default target. That's our variable. Oh. And we're going to do get component. So we know we have a script called some script. So we want to get that one. And we know it has a variable. So I go dot, and I can see kind of everything it has as long as it's public. And we had, oh, what the hell did I name that thing? What did I name that thing? I just called it thing. Dot thing. There we go. So now we're more or less stating that this float is going to be equal to some script's thing that's on that thing. There's a lot of things that are happening. Right, so that's our game object, and that game object has this script. So now if I hit it, see how it's 99? So it copied it over. And if I change this, doop, and reboot it, it just literally just takes it. Just like that. So anyways, there's a little bit on